Graham Carr is the president and vice-chancellor of Concordia University. We've spoken in the past, most recently, of course, about the provincial government's decision to basically make life more difficult for McGill, for Concordia, and for a while for bishops, although that situation changed somewhat. But Graham, I know now, here we are. This has now been in effect for a while, and you've come out and said there's no question, but it is hurting Concordia. So I want you, if you can, just to let people know it there. I'm sure many of them are Concordia grads or went to Concordia. How much is this hurting?
Hi, Aaron. Well, I guess the first thing I need to say is right now, universities, not just in Quebec, but across Canada, are getting clobbered by both federal and provincial policies on immigration. So it's important to understand it's not just one or the other. It's really the combination, because the federal government announced a 10% cut to study visas, and of course, the Quebec government has imposed quotas on all of the universities, individual universities. The larger issue is that the message coming from both levels of government to prospective students has been very unwelcoming, and as a result, we're seeing not just at Concordia, but across Quebec, Anglophone, Francophone institutions, and frankly across the country, a really catastrophic drop in the number of international students who are applying. And the further complication is that the bureaucratic procedures for getting, first of all, a certificat d'acceptation québécois and then a federal study permit and a study visa have also become extraordinarily challenging for students, some of whom in extreme cases are waiting as long as 93 weeks for visas to be processed. So it's the combination of the rhetoric around the actual policies, the cut in the number of student visas, the application of quotas, and then what is increasingly looking like a dysfunctional visa processing system. It's had a really detrimental effect.
But Graham, other than that, how are things going? No, I'm sorry.
Hey, listen, Aaron, come on. We've had lots of good news at the university, right? Remember, our students in late August in Space Concordia launched the first rocket off Canadian soil. You're probably a fan of the Emmy Awards. There were two Canadian graduates, Jessica Lee Gagne and Barry Julian, who won Emmy Awards for cinematography, and Barry is co-executive editor of the Stephen Colbert Show. Our business school, the John Molson School, got named top MBA program and top business school in Canada last week by Bloomberg Business Week, and we just closed our capital campaign last evening with a record $365 million, exceeding our wildest target. So we have challenges, but there's a lot of good news coming out of the university.
You know, you as you described it, Graham, you basically got nailed with a double whammy here, right? You knew what you were dealing with from the province, and then of course along comes the federal issue now, where you're having trouble finding anybody who's allowed to get in here, and that length of time before you're allowed to come in, of course, as you just said, it makes it even worse. The question then becomes, and I think I asked you this originally when we started seeing these things come into place. Where do you have to make cuts, or do you, or is this money that you raised in your capital campaign enough to offset that?
No, so the challenge, the capital campaign doesn't replace operating funds, so we have to keep a wall between those two things. So the operating funds, the day-to-day money that we use to pay salaries, to keep the lights on, to fulfill our contractual obligations, etc. That operating budget is heavily dependent. It's 86% dependent on student registration, either the direct revenue that we get from students and the tuition that they pay, or the grants that we still receive in some cases from the government of Quebec, or in most cases from the government of Quebec for students. So we can't mix the philanthropy with the operating. What the philanthropy has allowed us to do is to provide student scholarships. That's the single biggest investment we've made. In fact, on the topic that you and I have discussed before, the increased tuition to rest of Canada students, we've been able each of the last 2 years to offset that increase for the students through philanthropic donations. But there's no question that when we look at our operating budget and the current financial situation, and it's been ongoing now for 3 years, we have been making cuts, not renewing contracts, reducing the number of courses that are available, reducing the number of sections that are available, increasing class sizes. It's been a difficult run for the last 3 years, and that's going to continue.
By the way, if I can ask, because I know you spoke to the Chamber of Commerce here the other night, right? And part of what you pointed out to them, what we don't see perhaps when these cuts came into effect was, this talent pool or future talent pool that you would have had ends up staying in the province. It ends up going to work in businesses here. Are you getting support from businesses?
Yeah, I think the opportunity to speak to the Chamber of Commerce yesterday was an opportunity to make the point with the business community that the problems that we're experiencing as universities right now are our problems today. They are about to become the business community's problem tomorrow when the pool of talent that they have been used to hiring over the last several years is smaller, less diverse, less cosmopolitan, less multilingual than it has been in the past. And that message, I hope, is landing with there were a lot of business leaders there. I think they're seeing it. There are other businesses that are going to be affected simply by the drop in the number of international students. International students across Quebec contribute more than $4 billion a year to the Quebec economy just as consumers. That's almost half of what the aluminum industry contributes to Quebec. So the decline in the number of international students is going to have an impact on landlords, on small medium enterprises and businesses, which depend on the commercial activities of students. Not to mention the value add that talent brings to all of the fine point industries we've created in Montreal, whether it's the aerospace industry, whether it's the games industry, whether it's AI, whether it's precision medicine. All of those things now are being put at risk. If I can give you 2 data points, in terms of research activity across Quebec, 49% of the PhD students in Quebec are international students. Well, as that number falls and falls and falls, it drives down our research productivity. Right. The second data point is 3 years ago, Aaron, we had at Concordia 8,000 applications from international students. We didn't accept them all, of course, but that was the size of the market. This year, 2,500 applications.
Wow. Graham, I got to leave it at that, and I know we'll talk again about this. Always appreciate your time. Thank you so much, and good luck.
I'm Dylan Playfair.
And I'm Tyler Smith.
We're putting loneliness in the penalty box by talking to some of our favorite athletes about the importance of friendship.
This is Bromance.
Bromance is brought to you by Charm Diamond Centers, proudly Canadian-owned and operated. Charm has been part of your love stories and bromances for over 50 years. And you can find Bromance on the iHeartRadio network or wherever you get your podcasts.